All right, welcome back, everybody. So in this lesson on Google Sheets, we're going to take what we've learned so far, and we're going to start to set up a expense tracking sheet with categories. And so to begin with, you should already have your sheet set up something like this, and this is a good start. So make sure you've got your calendar set up on the left with that little automatic date thing that we set up last lesson. And then initially, we're just going to have we'll go ahead and hide those columns for the day, month, year. And so we'll need our cost per hour units, and then we'll probably leave the total cost here, but we're going to add a couple columns here, and we're going to make a couple other changes so we can set up trackers and categories. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to rename this sheet. And so on the bottom here, I'm just going to call this expenses. And we're going to go ahead and create a new sheet. And so that's this little plus symbol down here. We'll create a second sheet. And this one we're going to call Dropdown. Except I can't spell. Oh my goodness, sometimes I'm really dyslexic. And so this, and we're going to make another sheet as well. And we're going to call this one Engineering Room. And so this engineering room, this is just going to be some of the back-end stuff that we need. This drop-down is also going to be a bit of back-end stuff that we need, right? So what we're going to do first is we're going to decide how many categories we want to add here. And this is entirely up to you. You can add as many as you like. And so let's just have a little imagination of what we would need. So let's say we're going to do category. Again, I can't spell. Category. I am so bad at spelling. We're going to do subcategory. And then we can do something like, for example, funding source. Once again, I can't spell. So funding source could be like, which granting agency is it coming from? Is this a grant? Yes or no? Is this restricted funding, not restricted funding? There's so many things you can add here. So I'm just going to give you a few examples, but really this is up to you guys to decide what categories you need and which ones would be useful for you. And so what I'm going to go ahead and do is put category, subcategory, funding source. Then I'll add restricted funding. And let's see, what else could we do? We could say project name, something like that, maybe. I might even bring project name over to the first one. So, you know, if it's, we might have one expense sheet for all of our projects. And so we can have all of our projects named listed here as different options, right? So project name, category, subcategory, funding source, restricted funding, that'll be a yes or no. What else could we put? Maybe that's enough for now. Well, we could do like, we can add a, well, I was thinking we could add a tax bracket. All right, well, we'll save that for another lesson. So for now, we're just going to do categories. And so what we've done here is we've set up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 categories. And there's another very useful thing that you can add here, which is paid by who. This is a very useful little trick just so that you can keep track of who is making the expenses for each receipt that you have. Right, so each one of these is going to be an expense line item. And when that expense is made, you have your receipt for it. You might want to be able to track who was responsible for, preparing that expense item or preparing that receipt. So this would be basically a list of your staff. So now that we've got our, I'm just noticing I have a blank row here. I'm not sure how that happened. Oh, I think I know how that happened. We hid. Yeah, that's how that happened. Be careful with that. These things need their own separate row. So because this is a merged cell. So this is actually cell number A1, but it's just been merged across B1, C1, and D1. So B1, C1, and D1 are kind of hidden. And when we hide these sheets, don't delete row 2 there because we actually have stuff in there. And in fact, one way around that, actually, I'll just show you that right now, is if you've decided that you need 2 rows here, for your kind of top line, right? you can actually do something like this, right? So you can actually merge these cells together. And this is something that can cause problems with your formulas in Excel, but I have yet to find a situation in Google Sheets where it's really causing any real problem. And so we'll point out those issues when they come up. So for now, I'm just going to merge those cells together. So each one of these items is basically going to be the same height as this whole block together for the date. All right. All right. So that'll make it look nicer. I'm going to go ahead and hide our little date there as well. And another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add another column to the left of this. And I'm going to put like... So when you get your receipts, one trick that I use is I give every receipt a unique code number. And like, this is nothing complicated. I'm literally just going to have it start at, you know, it could be like 2020-1 and so on. And so, oops, we don't want that to be a date. So let me format that to regular plain text. Oh, no, format number. There we go. 2020. There we go. And so, if you then say 2020-2, and then you drag that down, you'll see that that just automatically increases the numbers. Although, why is it something at 12? That's strange. Oh, it's putting it as a date still. I need to take off the data validation, that's why. So come up here to data, go to data validation. It's because because I did it from this column, it's copying that data validation. So I'm just going to remove that validation. And let's see if we can get this to just show up as we want. We'll call it 20-1. And yeah, there we go. So once you remove that validation, it should automatically create a code. And so basically this is year 2020 and then receipt number 30. And you just keep that trend going. You can always sort this later. So this is the code is just to help you identify it, right? If you needed to match the entry here with the actual receipt, you could do it by the date, but then you have to look around on that date if you have many receipts from the same day. By having a code on every receipt, it's just going to save you time, right? You can just, especially if you store your receipts in the order of this code, then you can just quickly skim through your actual receipt book and find the code that you're looking for. So I'm just going to leave that over there on the side. We don't need to worry about that for now, but it is what it is. So every time a new receipt comes in, it'll basically have to be under one of these new codes. So what we're going to focus on more today is these categories. And so how do we do tracking of these categories? And so I think we're going to need one more sheet for this, and we're going to call it totals. Oops. Yeah, totals. So let's go now to our drop-down, and what I'm going to do is this, just so I get my list of things. I'm just going to paste them here, and now this is where we start to get interesting. So here I'm going to give this... wait a second, hang on. Right, yeah. So let me put these in a slightly... First of all, I'm going to unmerge them. They don't need to be merged. Oops. Wait, unmerge. Yes, that's correct. There we go. So you just click on that again to unmerge them. And now I'm going to put these over like this. So I'm just going to take all of them and put them up there. Now, the reason I'm doing that is because I'm going to come back over to my expense sheet. I'm actually going to delete these. And what I'm going to do instead, and this is a little trick to help reduce the chances of having mistakes in your presentation. So instead of writing it in here, I'm actually going to always link over to my drop-downs page. So to do that, you don't actually need technically a formula. You're just going to use the same intro to start your work here. Excuse me. So I'm going to press enter, and then I'm just going to click on the drop-down sheet and watch what happens in my formula space up at the top, yeah? So I'm going to click there. So we've now come over to expenses, and I'm going to click on this, and it's going to say, to drop down, and it's going to say drop down exclamation point. So that exclamation point is telling it that that is the name of this sheet. I want it to look at this sheet, not on the original sheet. And that's it. Drop down A1, I'm going to press enter. And now this says project name, but it's not actually project name. It's dropdown A1. So whatever is in dropdown A1 will show up here. So if I put XYZ, then over on my expenses sheet, it says XYZ. And I strongly recommend you guys do this kind of trick as often as possible, especially for things like categories, names, months, years, that kind of stuff, simply because it's going to save you a ton of time from having to deal with mistakes. So on our drop-down sheet, we're going to put project name. And now what I can do over on my expenses sheet is I can just drag this to the right. And you'll see that basically what it's figured out is because I didn't put the $sign, A1 becomes B1, and then C1, and then D1, and then E1. I think we had one more. Paid by who? Yeah, perfect. So we've got our categories. We've got our axis labeled up here with this. So this is essentially an axis label for these columns. So we've got the project name, so on and so on. And so now we need to make the options for each of these, right? And so let's go back to our dropdown and actually list the names of our projects. So let's say we have one project called our film project. Let's say we have another project called U.S. Embassy Grant. Let's say we have another project called, I don't know, MacArthur Foundation Grant. Let's say we have another project that is our environmental education program. You can, I mean, again, this is totally up to you how you want to break this down. I'm just coming up with sample names here. Community outreach program. And maybe you might want to put something like general or operations as a main cost as well that doesn't specifically go to any one, project like that. Okay, so then for category, let's list some categories that we have. So we might have salary, we might have staff benefits, we might have, what else could we do? Transportation, we might have equipment, we might have vehicles, lodging, food and drink, phone credit, computers, etc. So that could be like computers and their accessories, camera gear, field gear, right? So boots, gear. I don't know who field gear is. Field gear. We'll just add a couple others for extra information. What else? Somebody give me some ideas here. Rent, utilities, taxes, entrance fees. That's probably good enough. And for subcategory, I'm going to skip this, but we could have a ton of additional stuff for subcategories, right? You could have healthcare, so staff benefits / healthcare, and so on. So we'll do healthcare. We can do food, drinks, hotels, homestays. We can get more specific, basically. Water, camping equipment, electronics. We could flip this around too. We could have electronics be over here, maybe. And then we can put computers, cameras, and appliances. All those three would be all under electronics. Phones, radios, so on and so on. So we can arrange this however we like. No big deal. Super easy. And funding source, we can put granting agency, private donation. This is totally up to you guys, right? How you want to structure it. This is all just for practice right now. Private donation, donor, board member, sponsor, program fee. This is like where the money is coming from for this. That's probably good enough. And then restricted funding. This is just going to be a yes or a no question, right? So we can just leave that. And then paid by who, we'll put our staff. So we've got John, Jane, Mary, and Danny, because why not? You can have as many staff as you want. You can put volunteers, interns, whatever. So now what we're going to do is we're going to come back to our expenses sheet and use the data validation to limit what can appear here. So I'm going to select this entire column, J, and I'm going to go to data validation. And here where it says list from a range, this is what I want. So I'm going to click list from a range, and I'm going to select the data range by clicking on this thing over here. We can also just tell it to reject the input if it's wrong, so I'll just do that first. So now I'm going to select the data range, and here it's waiting for you to put in this data range. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Dropdown, and I'm going to click on A for project name. However, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to change this to A2 to the rest of A. So kind of similar to the way we wrote the formula for the array formula. I'm telling it I don't actually want to include A1 in this list because A1 is just the name of this group. So I'm basically excluding A1 and I'm just telling it A2 and then the rest of A. So I'm going to click OK on that, and then I'll save that, and then I'll come back to expenses and show you what that's done. It's put a little drop down arrow next to all of these cells. And when you select it, it gives you your list of available options. And this is, again, a very powerful way to make sure that when people are entering a category or a subcategory, that the spelling is correct. And the reason that's important is because when we're using formulas to calculate each of these categories, if film project was entered differently one time, like maybe somebody forgot that it was called film project and they just typed in film projects and put an S on the end of it, that line would be lost from our formulas that are looking for the word film project. Does that make sense? So using this system to put in your things that you're going to set up formulas to count, using a drop-down list and data validation is a great way to avoid any complication, and it makes it easier for your people to find the information that they would need to put here. So not only can you select on things, but you can also start typing. So if I type grant, it actually will filter the available search results for the options that are grants that I have listed. And the great thing is if you decide that later you need to add something new, you can just go ahead and add that again. So let's say we have the project name, and we'll go ahead and say that we have a new project called the nature, the birds of Cambodia film, right? This is a new project that we're working on. I'm going to get into change this to new training videos, for example, this grant that I'm currently working on. And yeah, the funding source really should be over here, right? And so now when we go back and we check out this option, that we have this new Birds of Cambodia film, right? And that's one of the reasons why we want to set the data validation to be the entire row of A here, right? Not just, we don't want to just draw a box like that, because then if we add more things to it, they won't show up. So you want to go A2 to the rest of A, right? Using the symbol A2 and then colon and then A. All right. So let's go ahead and quickly do this for the rest of this. So we're going to select K, data validation. We're going to reject the input if it's wrong, and we're going to select the range from B, and we'll just add the 2 there, and done, and save. And we'll go back and do this with subcategory, data validation. So you see, it really isn't that long to set this kind of stuff up. So there's our subcategory. All right, C2 to C. Reject input, save. By the way, if you need to change any of these at a later point in time, no problem. So let's say I make a mistake on this one. You just select it again, go to data validation, and that same thing will pop up. And now you can select the range, you can make edits to it, you can adjust it again. You'll see it's automatically put in 1000, but if you add more rows, that'll change automatically. So you can get in and edit it. You can change the conditions of that validation, right, if you want. And so we'll just continue with this. So data validation, we're almost done here. We'll set it to reject the input if it's wrong. Where are we up to now? I think I've forgotten. We're up to funding source. Okay, save. Back to expenses. Restricted funding is just going to be a yes or no, but I'm still going to do the same trick. Data validation. We're going to drop down restricted funding. And I have another trick about this yes or no. Sometimes yes or no's can be fairly useful in other situations, so I might want to do something a little bit differently, but I'll tell you about that later. I was just thinking maybe it's not necessary to link these things up here to these things over here, because if I, for example, I could just label this column as yes, no, and then use this column anytime I need a yes, no response, rather than it always being limited for restricted funding. Although either way, it should be fine. I can use this column anyways, even though it says restricted funding up here. All right, last one, expenses, paid by who, data validation, select this little thing, go to our drop down, paid by who, we're going to select F2 to the rest of F, and we'll reject the input if it's wrong, and we are done. The last thing we need to do is I change the name of this, so we'll select that. I'm going to double click on that to make it spread automatically so it fits the whole thing. I'll do the same thing up there. Oh, I don't like that. There we go, much better. You'll notice that all of those have that red dot telling you that that's wrong. And again, that's because we applied that data validation to the whole column just to make it easier. So to get rid of it, I'm just going to select row 1 and 2, data validation, remove validation. And it just removes the validation from all of those top line items. All right. And so as you can see now, we've got all of these categories are automatically pulling up with all of this, these options. And this will be very, very useful when we're doing calculations later. So you guys should have something that looks like this already set up in your sheet. And so now what I'd like you to do is just kind of fill everything in. And it can be totally random. Like, I don't really care what you're doing. Try to just get everything a little bit mixed up, right? Don't put the same thing in for every single option. So I'm just going to kind of try to get a bunch of these selected randomly. We just basically, I want to get some fake information to work with, right? So just go ahead and fill all these things in. And again, you can just start typing as well. So like if I start typing B, then it comes up with staff benefits. I can type B again, staff benefits, salary. There we go. So I type S, get salary, phone credit. So you can also just start typing with your keyboard as well. And then once you get enough of a mix, I think I have everything in there. So I have everything, or am I missing some of them? No, I need some taxes, entrance fees, utilities. Just try to make sure you have a little bit of everything. It doesn't matter if you don't have everything, but you want to get let's get enough data to work with to be usable. All right. Right. And we'll do the same thing over here. We'll just try to get a little bit of everything. And again, when you're really entering this, you would make sure that it that it makes sense. Like, having transportation and then water, doesn't make sense. Like, it would be food and then water. So anyway, this is just for trading practices. We just need to get some data put in here. And I'm just going to go ahead and copy all of that and then click down here and paste there so we have even more information. And then I'm just going to do the same thing here. So I'm just going to copy this and paste. And I'll just take a random selection here and drag it down. And there we go. So I'll do funding source. Here we only have a few options, so that's good. So we'll just go like so. And you know what? I think always another good option is to have other. Always good to have an other option in case you have missed something. All right. And we'll drag that down to there. And restricted funding, we can just do like half of them no's and half of them yeses. So just go like so. That might not even be useful in this one. And we'll divide them evenly amongst the staff here. And drag that down. Beautiful. And now we need some money, because we got to make sure everything has money and date. The item, this is where you would actually type in a description of that receipt. Right, so this area here is actually your kind of most important area. You need to make sure that whoever is writing the receipt, when they enter it here, it needs to be very clear what this is, right? So transportation from Siem Reap to Phnom Penh for workshop on lizards, right? Whatever, something like that. The more information, the better. So I'm going to go ahead and just put some random numbers in here. I'm literally just jamming on my keyboard, so doesn't matter what's what. Wow, this is an expensive day. And I'll just do this all the way down to the bottom of my data that I've put over there. I missed one. Let's do some cheaper things down here. Oop, I typed a non-number thing there. Oops, I keep doing that. Good. And then, so we've got our costs in, and then how many units are we buying? So let's do, a lot of these are just going to be 1, some of them will be 2, some of them will be 3, 1, 1, 1, we'll do 2, 2, 2. Oh, no, that's too much. Alright, and then we'll just, we'll copy that section, put that down. Again, this is all just so we have some data to work with, right? You guys would actually enter this based on real information. All right, so there we go. So we've got that sheet, and we'll go ahead and give everything a date so that everything is going to be actually filling out that date information. And then we'll be done with this video at the end of this, and we'll move to the next one where we're actually going to start setting up the final trackers for this. Come on, there we go. And I think I'll just take these dates and send them down to there, and I'll do the same with the receipts. There we go. All right, so we should have 48 or so. I guess we could have, let's make it a nice even 50. So we have a few more things just to have a nice number. Rent and staff benefits, appliances. Yes, rented appliances. Granting agency, sure, doesn't matter. And we'll say no. And no, and we'll put it as, ooh, John, and John again. Great. All right, so we got 50 receipts here, and we've got a ton of data for the project name. Let's just go ahead and spread these out now. We'll put a lot of general operation ones, and I think we have a little bit of everything there now. And so we'll just copy that and send that down to there. Again, this is all just to practice, right? So you guys would be filling this in with real information. So you guys should now have something that looks like this. Let's try to get at least 50 lines of fake data for now. And that's going to wrap up the video for today. We've got our dropdown set up. We've got our data validation set up. We've got our calendar set up, our receipt code set up. And we've got our drop-down sheet started, and the next one is we're going to start working on our some totals counts. So that's going to wrap it up for this video, and I'll catch you guys soon.